Hello, I'm Daniel Yorba. I'm a professional industrial designer and the current design lead for action sport protective gear brand ProTech. Now, I've been taking advantage of video tutorials online for quite a while, and I thought it was time to contribute one of my own. So the following is the first of hopefully a few screencasts that share my personal workflow as I create ID layouts, sketches, and renders. As you can see, I'm using Photoshop CS6, and I have prearranged some images to use as underlays, and I find that odd numbers work best. Arrangement makes use of the white space or the negative space between the images, and I use underlays because it allows me to remove perspective from the task and allows me to focus on the design, and also to ensure the proportions are correct. And this is especially important when ergonomics are concerned, as they are with footwear. So let's start with the side view. That's the first thing you do when you're sketching a shoe. And I always use basically the default brushes. I start with 8-point hard brush with shape dynamics turned on and the hardness set up, and my spacing adjusted a little bit tighter than the default. So I'm going to begin sketching here by just roughing in patterns and creating a new sketch that is appropriate for the look and feel that I'm going for. And just for a little background on the shoe I'm designing today, I'm going for kind of a streetable cross-country running shoe, and I'm taking inspiration from like vintage hiking boots and vintage running shoes, as well as current lifestyle trends. Now, you'll notice that I'm constantly turning the page around and zooming in and out, and I do this for a couple reasons. One, to get the best line quality from my hands, and also to try to always look at the image with fresh eyes. Now, what I mean by that is that sometimes you can get too close to your work and not see a glaring problem. You know, looking at it on its side or upside down allows the sketch to be seen abstractly, and problems hopefully present themselves. Now, researching this category a little bit, I learned that cross-country shoes are usually built a little tougher than road shoes, so I'm adding some beefier paneling to protect the front of the foot, as well as some beefier eyelets for the laces. Now here I am going to block in some colors, and I'm doing this really quickly just to see how the pattern is going to work when it's time to create an actual line. And this mid panel here that I just colored is kind of cool because it allows it to look kind of like a blucher, or you can pop it so it's all alone, and it creates kind of a more vintage look. That's not a permanent. I'm not going to use those colors in the actual sketch. Just it's a tool that I use when I'm planning out the patterning. So here I've ghosted back the opacity on that underlay sketch, and I'm adding some cleaner lines and starting to think a little bit more about details once I have the basic paneling how I like it. I use Pinterest a lot when I'm looking for research imagery. Usually I would build an inspiration board and have a little bit more reference when I'm sketching, but because this is a kind of a side project, I didn't really go through an entire design process for every little element. Here to save time, I'm copying elements over so I don't have to draw each individual D-ring and gusset all by on its own. I just copy it over, and I'm still playing with the proportions of this side panel. I'm not quite happy with it. This project, you'll see it's all branded Adidas. This is that's just because I'm a fan of Adidas. It's not affiliated in any way with any kind of professional Adidas product or anything whatsoever. Now, through the magic of video and Screencast-O-Matic, the program I'm using, I'm going to fast forward it a little bit. I actually created 3 sketches, side views that I'm going to use in the layout, and you'll see those in just a minute here. I actually don't end up using this first one in its current iteration, so you'll see some differences to the one I end up finally using. But here I'm just experimenting with the different cutouts on that side piece here. How I could perforate that shape to get it to look a little lighter. Right now I'm feeling like it's a little bit heavy. So here are the final 3 side views, and I'm feeling like the top one is definitely the strongest. However, I'm still going to keep the other 2 in the layout just to show possible variations. I mean, it's always good to have some back pocket designs when you're in a meeting trying to present, because if people aren't feeling the one, you always have some other ones to talk about. So next I'm going to work on some of these little vignette sketches that I have below. I'm going to start with this front 3/4 view, and for a vignette it's different than a side view because I'm trying to just add a little bit more information about this front piece, which I think is kind of the focal point of the design. And I think the vignette sketch is actually a lot more interesting. You can kind of add some life to your overall layout by intentionally leaving some information out of the sketch, and really putting a lot more attention to where you want to draw the eye. So that means more contrast, it means more detail, and so here I'm just tinkering with that side view. So it's nice to bounce back around. That's kind of one of the beauties of planning your layout like this, is that it's not just a bunch of random sketches put on a page. Planning it this way allows you to do it all together, and it's a little bit more of an organic way to design, in my opinion, in my experience. So here I'm just showing how those little leather straps wrap around and are riveted onto the D-rings, and then these are just these tri-stripes are just kind of stitched on, so that's going to be like a deco stitch. For the back of the shoe, I'm really just indicating the shape. Same thing with the outsole. I'm not spending a lot of time on the outsole for that front quarter view, or front 3/4. I do have to go in and do the laces, and that probably takes me the longest time on this sketch. I think it would look too blank and strange without laces. Some people have kind of a fancy way to do laces where they just kind of indicate it. For me, I think it looks a lot better to actually draw in the laces the way that they would look in real life. That's just something I prefer doing. So it takes a little bit more time, but I think it pays off in the end. So I'm also, as soon as I'm done with this sketch here, this little vignette, I'm just going to fast forward it to where that top view is done too, so you'll notice that that one magically gets finished. Just experimenting with that toe cap. I think the traditional way looks a little better though, so here I'm experimenting a little bit with a kind of a compression molded feature on that vamp piece. so that it could be like a harder part, some kind of synthetic. It doesn't mean it can't be suede, but so here we are. These are the 3 views of this shoe, the 2 vignettes and the 1 main side view. Now I'm going to start adding some value to the shoes. I'm not going to do the vignettes quite yet. I'll do those after I work on the main side view up here. So now I'm going to start by just adding in a gray to the whole shoe. Some people use a pen tool. I prefer just going in by hand. I have a Wacom Cintiq that allows me to draw directly on the screen, and I find it just faster than the pen tool, and I'm sufficiently precise using the tools that I have, so it works for me. You might want to use a pen tool though, if you to create a selection and then just use your paint bucket to drop it in with the gray. So I start with just a base overall kind of a fill. Next, I'm going to pick a lighter gray, so a slightly lighter gray. I'm going to create a new layer above it. Actually, I'm going to hold down Command, and then I'm going to click on that layer, on the picture of that layer, to create the marching ants selection, and then add a new layer. And I'm going to start I'm going to call that the first layer, and I'm going to start with like I said, a lighter gray, and just fill in my toe cap here, and basically the first layer of paneling above the base layer. So I have the toe cap, and then I'm going to do my heel counter kind of mid piece. So this is going to be an overlay to the base, but an underlay to that other heel counter component. So my computer actually crashed, and I had to redo just this blocking in, so that's why the gray kind of shifted. But I'm just going to keep continuing here with that first layer, which would be, I'm guessing suede. It could be a heat pressed or it's like a hot melt synthetic, but I'm guessing I would, for this shoe and the style that we're going for, I'm guessing it would be suede. Just cleaning up the edges. So I'm going to click a slightly lighter gray and block in the next panel up. Next layer up, rather. And this heel panel. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer, anything. You can either email me on my website. There's my email link there. My website is danielyorba.com. Or if this happens to be on YouTube, just in the comment section, I'll probably check it. So I was adding a new layer here and just blocking in my outsole. I find it layers are something that it's really good to take advantage of, but not to go overboard on. Try to keep it as organized as you can, because it's really easy to let it get away from you, and you start to, you forget what's on what layer, and if they're not labeled, you get into more trouble than it's worth. So right now I have my base layer, my first layer, that second layer, and then I write my outsole layer, and then a detail layer. And I try to keep it at that number just for colors. I'll also have a couple layers in a minute here for textures, but yeah, you can definitely do too many layers. So these colors are basically arbitrary. This color up isn't. I'm not actually putting the colors in right now for any kind of like a colorway, or because I think they look good. Really just blocking out the shapes. That said, I do actually like the gray though, the gray and the red. I wouldn't be mad at some gray and red shoes. I think the red outsole is pretty crazy though. Just blocking in a little layer there in the outsole, just a little detail call out. To reference that, just to kind of echo what's going on with the patterning on the front of the shoe there. And then on the heel as well, creating some repetition in those tech looking pieces, to where they look like they have a foundation in the outsole. Okay, now I've got a really soft brush with my transfer on, and my spacing pretty tight. It's really soft, and I'm just going to add some light here. Take off my brush projection. Now I'm going to have the light coming from straight above, and I'm going to add just a little bit more light bouncing up from the floor plane. That's going to create a dark spot at the widest point of the shoe. That's called the core shadow, and I'm just going to illustrate it really quickly. So you have light coming from directly above the shoe that's causing a highlight on the top end, and then you have it's hitting the ground, but it's casting a shadow, as we all know. But some of that light that hits the ground also bounces up and hits the lower edge of the shoe, and so that's why you have that secondary highlight along the lower edge of the shoe there. And so it's going to make along the widest point of the shoe, it's going to be darker. So where the shoe is wide along the big kind of broad edge of the shoe, that's going to be a big dark spot. And then on the toe, it's actually going to be a thinner dark spot. That's called your core shadow. So that helps understanding a little bit of that helps to render a more realistic shoe. So now I'm going to go in and add some highlights to the shoe. So I have, shiny pieces are going to get hot spots. And so I'm just kind of experimenting the best way to do it with these buttons. And I think it's just a simple single point hotspot or reflection. And then I'm going to add, use my soft brush to make it a little bit smaller and add in some more softer hot spots. And this is because it's a soft surface, it's an organic surface, so it's not something like like a Class A car surface that would get a lot harder of a highlight. But on a soft surface like a shoe, you want to give it a nice really soft highlight to make it look a little bit more like a piece of clothing or something that's fabric. One way you could do this, if you don't want to keep erasing and painting back in, is to just do your hot spots and your reflections, highlights all at once, and then add a layer mask, and that'll make it so that you can remove some of the white and then add it back in really easily. I find for me, I just use in instances like this, I'll just use the brush and the eraser tool. I think it's easier for my workflow, but a lot of people do use layer masks, and that works too. So here I'm just trying to indicate a ribbed kind of a hard surface, something that has a little bit of a different texture, so it's picking up the highlight differently than the rest of the shoe. I'm not too concerned about making this sketch photorealistic for the level of finish that I'm going for, and I'm kind of trying to simulate a work sketch. So this is a situation where you would be doing a wall full of sketches like this, of pages like this. So this, for example, I mean this sketch took me, this layout took me about 5 hours to complete. So imagine, a week you could probably have, a good little set that you could present to a client or a room full of people, and have some good content. I mean, at that point you're really limited by your imagination and the amount of ideas, good ideas that you come up with, as opposed to being limited by the amount of work you can actually pump out. So here I'm just illustrating how one could use a layer mask to create your light effects. So you can erase them out, and then you just press the X key for hotkey, and then you can just paint them back in without actually losing that information. So I'm fairly happy with this, with my highlights right now. Let's add in some more detail. So here I thought that that little hard piece on the heel looked a little bit too much like brushed metal, so I added some line details just to try to communicate that it's at least beveled, so it has some dimension to it. Just improving the shadow there, just giving it a soft edge. So here I've added some textures. I have a suede texture and a mesh texture that I'm going to use. So what I'm going to do is just desaturate both of those. So I've hid the mesh. I'm going to Command U, brings up the saturation. I've adjusted the transparency of the layer to multiply, and I've put it I hold down Command and then clicked on that first layer, and so that it's got the marching ants on it, and then I've just clicked the layer mask button, and it's created a layer mask for me, so that just the paneling that I've on that first layer, which I'm saying is suede, is going to get this texture. So it automatically put it in there for me. So next I'm going to do the mesh. So I'm going to do the marching ants on the base layer, and I'm going to do the same thing where I click that layer mask and it automatically does it. So I'm just going to put it on the right layer for all those layers there, and I am going to make sure that it's underneath the suede. And there's some funky stuff going on, so I just have to adjust that layer a little bit. Label it mesh, label the suede one suede. So I'm going to go in to my layer mask and erase some of the stuff that I don't want to be mesh out of there. Now, but I do like that it shows up as mesh in the perforations in some of those kind of structural pieces. I'm going to dial back the opacity on those, though, because it's a little bit intense, I think. That looks pretty good. So to do my background, I have some watercolor brushes preloaded. I'm going to make a new layer behind all the other layers that have to do with the shoe, and I'm just going to drop in some watercolor elements. Right now I'm just experimenting a little bit with the brushes itself, and to just try to get some variation. I end up actually not even using that, just switch to another brush to get the variety. I have enough of them. So that background looks pretty good. It's a little intense though, so I like to erase it out a little bit along the edges, and I can use another watercolor brush to erase it, or the soft brush. I find the soft brush just makes it look a little bit more realistic, like it were watercolor. It's also kind of nice to use a soft gray brush too, to give it some kind of natural shadow and dimension that makes it look like it's actually sitting there. Just the watercolor alone, I find, looks a little flat. And I'll just ghost it back a little bit so it's not so intense, because we want it to be about the shoe and not the background. And add just a little bit more so that it's not so symmetrical. I find asymmetrical is a little bit better, a little more dynamic in appearance. So now I'm going to add a new layer for the laces, and this color is Again, not a color that I'm going to use. It's just a color that didn't drive me crazy for right now. You'll see in the end. Pick a new color, pick a new palette for the actual colorway based on something that, again, references that vintage hiker or vintage running shoe kind of feel that we're going for. So these little vignettes are really fun to do, and I think I'm going to just render it right now. And again, I'm not trying to render the whole shoe. Just like my sketch, I'm really trying to bring focus into this one panel. And what I like to do is try to do that by kind of faking like the rest of the shoe is kind of overexposed, or so it's like all one big highlight. So I'll block out the part that I want, the part that I really want to see, and then I really quickly do the rest of the shoe, and then I basically just but try to do it like it's being overexposed by a bunch of light. But before that, I'm going to go through and just organize my layers a little bit. So I've just created a group in a folder, and it's for the side view, and so that I can put all those in it. All the side view render parts go in the side view render folder, and now it cleans up my little layers menu a lot. So now I have just my front quarter vignette, and so I have the top panel, which is that guy, and then I have my bottom panel. So I'm going to do it in a lighter gray. And I just try to think, by just what would it look like if I just had a little bit of shadow, like the rest of the shoe was all blown out. How can I indicate some dimension and some, like give it kind of a 3D look and feel without spending too much time on it, because really just trying to go as fast as I can, and I think overthinking it can be your enemy here. You just try to do what looks good, but I know the inside of the shoe back there, I want that to kind of be darker so it's not so flat. And then for these laces, that's also something that I wanted to draw attention to is how those laces are put in there. So I'm going to add a little bit of a drop shadow to them too in just a minute. So I'm softening up the lines that I put on it. Now this is kind of a trick that I like to do that really makes these look interesting. Is so I'll my shadow. See, it's right now it's a hard line. But what I'll do is I'll really soften it towards the back, and then I'll allow it to get a little bit harder as it gets towards the front of the shoe. And I do that so that it draws focus to the front, to that piece where I want people to look. Adding a little bit of a ground shadow just so it looks grounded. It doesn't look like it's floating. Or I realize my line work has a little bit of a problem in it, so I accidentally have a ground shadow there running into the outsole. But that's easily fixed. Not a big problem at all. So I want to block in my toe cap a little bit here. I'll probably remove most of it, but it didn't quite look like it was finished enough with just that one piece being dark. So here I am with my little drop shadow to try to indicate some dimensionality for these little lace pieces. So they're casting a little shadow on that low point there. Add a highlight here on this toe piece. Let it fade out. Again, just trying to add to anything I can to draw the eye to that main focal point on the shoe. Now I'm on to this front. Sorry, I'm going to make a folder for that one. Okay, so I have my top vignette is done there, and I am going to add my colorway finally. So I'm going to do I think this dark red with a teal and a dark brown. So that's my color palette. I've chosen to use like a climbing rope inspiration that I think it communicates the kind of outdoorsy feel pretty well. That teal is kind of a steely, kind of a desaturated teal, and I could use like a slate gray, but I thought this dark brown was interesting, and I thought communicated the hiker feel extra well. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the colors that I've already put in there, and I'm going to color pick and kind of custom adjust where they already are. I'm going to lock the layer there with that little checkerboard thing, what that's called, and just brush it in, brush the color in. It's really easy, as you know, everyone watching this probably already knows. So now I'm going to add the red, customize it a little bit. So that front panel and that the toe cap, and then that heel counter mid piece is going to be red, and then I'm going to do this kind of desaturated steely teal color for these tech pieces. I'm going to go black on the outsole for that bottom part, and I'm going to pop red on those midsole components because I actually think those look pretty good. I'm going to use dark brown again for these little lace gussets and for the D-rings as well. The D-rings, I'm guessing, would probably be a brass color, and given more time, again, if this was a more finished sketch render, I would probably start to do something like that, but I'm not really concerned about getting too detailed with it. It's nice to still give it kind of a loose appearance. So for the laces themselves, I want them to be kind of this teal color. I want to make them a hiker lace though, so I'm going to start with first just the base color, and then I'm going to go in just a minute with a white and add my hiker lace detail. I think that really works to tell that story that it's like a mini climbing rope or something. It definitely looks outdoorsy. And like I said, this is going to be kind of a lifestyle oriented shoe, so I think that's appropriate. So I'm going to hide my colorway inspiration, and before I'm done, I think I'm just going to fix the tongue here. The tongue looks a little bit weird, so I'm going to modify that. Just erase it out. My eraser tool is soft, now it's hard. Just erase it out and redraw it. Add a little, just to indicate some kind of a label. Erasing my color out of there, and then that base layer. So this is the final product. So you can check it out on my website, danielyorba.com. I'm going to have it and some basic inspiration and research in there as well. And so, yeah, I'm going to sign it now. And it's been a pleasure doing this tutorial, and I really hope you enjoy it and you get a lot out of it. Next time I'm probably going to do it a slightly different format. This I've learned a lot. Again, it was my very first one, so in the future I'm probably not going to do quite as much. 5 sketches is an awful lot for a tutorial. But yeah, thank you so much for checking in, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Okay, well, there you go. Bye now.